us to have a more varied experience at stands rather than just sitting in your cubicle and doing one thing all day long.
Yeah, that was definitely something that evolved. Industrial Light and Magic much in the same way, because everything when I started there was very compartmentalized. I got into a lot of trouble because I came from Disney and we were pretty freeform, and I worked in every department. And when we were doing Nightmare Before Christmas and Jim's Giant Peaches, you lock 200 people in a building for 2.5 years to make one movie, you get pretty close, and you share everything. When ILM was a lot faster paced and more of an assembly line process, so they tried to keep everything compartmentalized, and of course we all came in there and disrupted all of it. What came out of that was the idea that we could actually jump around. I spent a lot of time in trouble in the, I will say the principal's office, but it was the manager's office. I would get called in and go, so we heard you were in the machine shop today. Do you know how to do that? Yes, I know how to do that. Well, somebody turned you in. This would happen a lot until you kind of prove yourself. So it's, there's a lot of challenges, including people skills, that you have to learn when you work in this business. I forgot, going back to your question about how the business works, on the freelance end, it's exactly what we've been talking about. But on the business side, now that I'm doing a lot more of the production end of things, just to complete the question or the answer, we meet with producers, directors, and visual effects supervisors on projects. We break down exactly what's going to be in the movie, and we estimate what those things will cost. And we're actually in on the budgeting process on a lot of the projects that we get involved in. And then we'll turn in those numbers, and then they'll either get approved or not approved by the studio. And then sometimes we have to revise the numbers and figure out a new plan for how we're going to do a movie. And then eventually you find that place, and that's where the numbers are. Sometimes you just bid on the project if they've already decided how they want to do it. And then you turn in that bid, and hopefully you're lower than the other people and have a better reputation.
For me, it was much simpler to Stan would decide how much everything was going to cost. I need this much money to do this, and somehow we would get it done within that frame. So.
You guys are talking about working on a particular part, like the beginning, mold making or sculpting or whatever. When you have to let that piece go and it's your baby, and you see somebody else working on it doing something you really don't like about it, like how do you guys deal with that kind of thing?
I had a couple of incidents like that, and you just have to, it's like a child. You just have to have faith that the next person is going to do their job and they're going to do it well, and inevitably it turns out just fine. We can't micromanage everything. If there are more sculptures that need to be done, you just kind of let this one go and move on to the next one. But yeah, there were a couple of moments of angst here and there. Oh God, how's this mold going to be done? Maybe I should help. Oh no, I have other work to do. So.
Yeah, you do learn to let those things go. At ILM, we actually had a lot of practice in letting go of our work and not getting too precious, because most of our stuff got blown up. So you'd spend 3-4 months working on something and they'd blow it up in less than a second. Which is amazing to see. I highly recommend blowing stuff up if you can. With professionals, of course.
Somebody else's.
No, it's actually remarkably rewarding to see something you built get blown up, but I can't explain why. It's a lot of fun. The surprising thing for me when I first started getting into the pyro stuff, though, is that they shoot high speed. You guys all know how that works. So they shoot, the camera runs very fast and records a lot of frames, and then they play it back at a regular speed to slow down the event. So a very small explosion then starts to look very big, or a very small car crash or whatever looks very large, because all the debris and the fire is all happening very slowly and beautifully. The first time I was ever on one of those shoots, I thought something went wrong, because the camera's screaming and then the pyro goes off and it was like a firecracker, just went pop, and the model was gone. And I was like, so is that it? And they were like, we don't know. Well, we'll watch it tomorrow. It was on film, so they had to process the film and watch it the next day. And then, sure enough, the next day it was like this 4-stage fireball with particles and sparks and things flying. And Yeah, it's amazing how different it ends up looking in the final footage than the actual event. I've never actually met anyone who's gone to a pyro explosion and saw what they expected to see, because it's usually just like poof and it's gone. It's pretty amazing.
How much of an opportunity do you have to insert your creative vision, or I imagine it's different on different movies, but how much of it is just conforming to what the director is envisioning versus what you bring to the table?
It does vary. We always say, actually, there's a lot of catchphrases and things you come up with. We always say you get everything from a napkin to a blueprint. But of course, that's evolved over time, so now it's a napkin to a computer model. So it does change quite a bit. Sometimes things are very specific. Sometimes directors are very precise in terms of what they want. And that's great when you get that. Sometimes it's freeform, and that's also great for other reasons. You might actually get, on Star Wars, this used to happen a lot, they'd give us a design from one angle. And so we would have to make up all the other angles of that particular spaceship, and that was part of the process there. Other companies get really specific, so it does vary. But it's a lot of fun when you get that creative freedom. The only tricky part is turning on the creative switch every single day you go to work. There's no such thing as writer's block for us in our industry, because you have to go in and you have schedules and budgets and you have to move. So one of the things that I used to do, and still do, if I'm working on a project, I try to immerse myself in whatever subject matter that is, when I go home. So that work doesn't end at the end of the day for a lot of us. Because if I'm working on a World War II movie, I might listen to big band music and study every book and video and anything I can get my hands on, so that when it comes time for them to say, let's make the side of a ship, I know exactly what that is, and it's second nature. Star Trek is very different than Star Wars, the aesthetic. So you need to be able to just come up with what that's going to look like, on call. So the way I deal with that is to just, kind of, it's almost like an actor, doing, going and shoplifting, so you know what it feels like. Not naming any names.
For me, it was when I first started out. I worked on some pretty low budget films. We didn't have a lot of money on Day of the Dead. We didn't have a lot of money on Evil Dead 2. Day of the Dead, Tom Savini gave us a lot of freedom to create, whatever we wanted to do. He gave us, okay, we need a zombie that does this. Go do it. And we would go do it. We had a lot of freedom, and we felt we, really put our best effort into it, and had a lot of pride in the pieces. At the same time, working on these films, you always desire to work on the bigger films. You want to work on an A film that everybody is going to see. And my experience was, what you found was, when I did work on bigger films like T2 and Jurassic Park, that there was so much money being spent. I couldn't change a wrinkle without, okaying it with Stan, and he had to call the front office, and then pretty soon you have a meeting, and Spielberg's coming down, and the production designer, they're looking at the wrinkle, and they're studying it, and they don't know what to do, and Steven says something, and they all agree. He changes his mind, and of course he was right, and so there was a lot of that. It was a little frustrating, because work would just come grinding to a halt. It's like, okay, I guess I'll go and sculpt some more penguins now for Batman Returns. On the low budget films, we did pretty much what we wanted, and even sometimes Sam Raimi would, like on Evil Dead 2, I remember conversations where he would come in and go, okay, that looks good, paint it blue. And it's like, get out of here, you're not really paying us enough money to tell us what to do. We'll take care of this aspect. But ultimately, we work with him and try and give the director his view. I was kind of a mischievous person when I was in the industry. I oftentimes, if I really felt strongly about a design, and somebody else would come along and go, you need to change this, and I knew I couldn't persuade them to do it, I would just say, okay, all right, I'll fix that. And then they'd go away, and then I'd go visit, what's Chris doing over here, what's, Jeff doing, and go get some coffee and come back. And a few hours later, my boss would come back and go, and I'd go, here, what do you think about this? and I haven't touched it. You know, oh, that's much better. It's like, yes. So, sometimes you have to kind of play games to get what you want, but it didn't happen very often. But when it did happen, it was an awful lot of fun.
There's a lot of tricks you use. We learned actually working on low budget stuff at Colossal Pictures early in my career. We never had enough money to do anything we had to do, so we had to find ways to trick art directors into just approving things. So one of the strategies we would use is you would intentionally put one thing on the model or the set crooked.
Yeah. Give it 6 fingers.
Intentionally wrong.
Is that supposed to have 6
And then-
fingers?
And then,
Yeah, looks good, doesn't it?
yeah, for them to feel like they're doing their job, they have to come in and tell you to change something, and you knew this was the psychology behind it. So you would leave that thing, and they would come in, and sure enough, they'd go, you know, this is great, except for that one piece over there that's crooked. You're like, I'll take care of it.
Yeah. Fight for it. You go, no, this makes this piece. And they go, no, you have to get rid of that. And you go, yeah, all right, if you really think so.
Yeah, that actually backfired us when we got to the Matrix movies, because I had there was a model maker that worked with us in the model shop at Skellington Productions. We were doing Nightmare. And she later became an art director, and I was working for her on the Matrix movies. And so I had a bunch of stuff that I was presenting to her on the table, and she saw something, and she goes, "Oh, you know what? We should rotate that." And then she looked at me, and she goes, "Are you doing that thing?" I said, "Maybe." But it happens.
It's fun. Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
I think we had a question in the pink. Did you have a question from before? No? Okay. Right here. Okay, that's what it was.
Did you ever have a project where it seemed like everything was going wrong, and how did you deal with that?
No, never. Everything goes perfect.
Yeah. Right. Until the suits show up, yeah. It's good.
Is there anything that sticks out in your guys' mind? Like maybe the biggest challenge, maybe because of scale, because of scope, because you had to trick someone?
I can remember, similar to what we were just talking about, we had with the Jurassic Park T-Rex, I tell people, okay, I wanted to do, being a dino nut, I wanted to do a scientifically accurate T-Rex, all right? And because that's what the book was about. It was about cutting edge science, right? And so I was determined to put, a real, what we knew at that time T-Rex on screen. But Hollywood's attitude is, okay, this animal's 16 feet tall, 40 feet long, it's got 6-inch teeth, and huge claws, and it can step on you and kill you. How are we gonna make this thing scary? So it had to become like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of T-Rexes, and bigger and meaner than a T-Rex ever could be. And one of the things that Stan had me do at one point was he wanted me to build out the thighs, and we were still going through the design process with the prototype, the 5th scale prototype. And he had me build out the thighs. He wanted these big Arnold thighs on it, and it just looked like heck. And I would go home at night, and I would, I need 3 martinis tonight, hon. One of those to get to sleep, just to calm down, because I figured I was going to get blamed for this monstrosity when it finally made it to the screen. But I had built out the thighs huge, and Stan came in and he kind of liked it, and we had Rick Carter come up from the front office, and he was there with an entourage of people from Hamlin, and Rick pointed specifically to the thighs and said, "Is there something wrong with this area in here? Does this look like correct to you?" And I, of course, couldn't say a word, and Stan's standing there, and Stan did the old bait and switch, and after 10 minutes, had Rick convinced that it wasn't the thighs that were a problem, it was that the ankles needed to be larger. Okay? So, or something on the rib cage. So, he got completely distracted and completely forgot what the point was in the first place, and they walked away. And Stan whispers to me, "Get rid of those damn thighs." Yay, I get to fix them. So, yeah, it happens all the time.
Yes, it's never happened to me. Actually, there's so many stories. I'm going to pick a different one. I chose one yesterday. I'm going to do a different one today. We're working on the island, and there's a scene in the movie where the letter R falls off of a sign and crashes through a bunch of scaffolding. That's actually all miniature, all the scaffolding. So we had these very, very breakable miniature scaffoldings in the model shop, kind of lined up in neat rows. And I was standing over in the corner, and I have a small reputation for being a little clumsy. And I saw someone roll a chair over, and it hit one of the scaffolds, and it did the domino thing, and they all fell over, like half the stack. And I was watching them put them up, and I was standing there with one of my friends, and I'm like, I'm just going to stay over here. I don't want to get involved in this. I'm just going to make it worse, because I have that reputation. Anyway, so I waited for a while, and they were struggling. And so I finally said, okay, I better go over and help. So I go over. I reached down to pick up the first one in this row, and there was a whole second half of the room with scaffolding. And my rear end bumped that row and knocked them all over. So those are the kinds of things that can happen. But that's a particularly funny situation. But luckily, we're also very good at fixing things. That's a survival skill in fabrication, because the actual final product oftentimes for us is the prototype. There is no prototype then built. You just go straight into the real thing. So you do expect a few bumps along the way, and you expect some testing as part of the process of building your finished piece.
And we also had a motto, and it went, there's never enough time to do it right, but there's always enough time to do it over. So we would just mess with things, and it's, why don't we do it this way? No, let's try this. And then you run up against